I'm Wendy Reed and I teach high school math, and today we're going to learn about special right triangles. We have two different types. We have a 45, 45, 90 triangle, which is named because it has two 45-degree angles, which makes both of your legs congruent, and these symbols mean that they're congruent. Okay? Then we have a 30, 60, 90, which is a little bit different. We'll get into that in a little while. So let's talk about this one first. Okay. In a 45, 45, 90, as I stated, the legs are congruent. Okay? So it creates only one particular equation. And our equation is that the hypotenuse is equal to the leg times the square root of 2. Now, these are the legs. Remember, the hypotenuse is always across from the right angle in any right triangle. So there's your hypotenuse and there's your congruent legs. Now, before we actually get into solving this, I want to teach you a small topic first. This topic is rationalizing fractions with radicals. So let's say you have a fraction that looks like this. 3 divided by the square root of 2. Okay? In math, we don't like square roots in the denominator. It's a big no-no. So what we have to do is we call rationalizing. Okay? So we take our denominator, that's a radical, and we create a new fraction that we're going to multiply. Square root of 2, we put it in the numerator, and we put it in the denominator. And what that does is we need to multiply. And what's going to happen is we get the square root out of the denominator. So 3 times the square root of 2. You can't multiply that because one's a square root and one's not. So you just write it down. 3 square root of 2. Okay? And then you got the square root of 2 times the square root of 2. Now what happens here is you get the square root of 4 because 2 times 2 is 4. But when you take the square root of 4, you just get 2. So anytime you've got this, all you really need to do is take the number out of the radical. These are both 2's. You put a 2 over here. Sometimes you need to simplify. In this one, 3 over 2 does not simplify, so you don't need to. But if it were 10 over 5, you would need to simplify because 10 divided by 5 is 2. So that's how we use that. But we'll get to that more in a little while. Let's go back to this. Okay? I'm going to erase this. Okay? Now, if I have a leg, okay, let's say, for example, that I don't know what these, well, I do know what the legs are, but I don't know what the hypotenuse is. Let's say this is 4 meters. Okay? I know my legs are 4, but I don't know my hypotenuse. All I have to do is use my formula. H is equal to the leg times the square root of 2. What do I know? I know what the legs are, so I put it where the L is. So H is equal to 4 times the square root of 2. Use your units, meters. Okay? Now, if you want the decimal form of that, you would just need to plug 4 times the square root of 2 in the calculator, and it'll give you a decimal. Most of the time, rounding to the nearest tenth, which is one place after the decimal, would be sufficient, depending on what the directions for your problem would be. Alright, that's pretty easy. Now, it gets harder when you have the hypotenuse and you're looking for the leg. So let's say, for example, I don't know what my leg is. But I do know what my hypotenuse is. Say my hypotenuse is 12 inches. Okay? I'm still going to use the same formula. The only difference now is I don't know what the leg is. I know what the hypotenuse is. So when I'm looking, since I know the hypotenuse, this 12 goes where the H is. 12 is equal to leg times the square root of 2. Now, obviously, you've got numbers on both sides of your equation, so that you can't just leave it that way. We need to get this L by itself. In equations, when you need to get this number by, or this letter by itself, you do the opposite of what's being done. This is L times the square root of 2. The opposite of multiplication is division. So I divide by the square root of 2 on both sides. Okay? Now over here, we have the square root of 2 over the square root of 2. And anytime you have a number over itself in a fraction, they cancel out. So these go away, basically, is what happens. And what I have is L is equal to 12 divided by the square root of 2 inches. But I can't leave it like that. Remember earlier we said we can't have radicals in the denominator, so we have to rationalize that. So I go over here. Here's my answer, 12 divided by the square root of 2. My denominator is the square root of 2. So I do times the square root of 2 over the square root of 2 is equal to, do your multiplication, 12 times the square root of 2 is 12 times the square root of 2. And then as we said earlier, you don't have to do the multiplying, take the number out of the radical, you get a 2. Now this time, as you can see, 12 divided by 2, you can't simplify that. 12 divided by 2 is 6. Don't forget about your square root of 2, so your answer is actually 6 square root of 2 inches. And that is what your hypotenuse is. Again, if you want a decimal form, you would just need to multiply it in the calculator.